All right, Eddie Hearn is back. Chairman, Matchroom Boxing. He is down under this week in Australia for Matchroom's first show of 2025, which will be headlined by Jai Opetaia's cruiserweight title defense against David Naika. That's a fight you could watch Wednesday live on DAZN in the U.S. Unfortunately, Eddie did not ask me to be part of this broadcast team, so I do not get a trip to Australia. But Eddie, let's start with the midweek fight. This is not
Yeah,
something you see in boxing too often. How do you feel about midweek fights?
yeah. So it's quite common in Australia. A lot of the pay-per-view events, NRL here, their rugby league, the kind of version of football, if you like, is extremely popular and takes up a huge amount of that weekend activity. So big fights in Australia have always kind of landed um, on in midweek. I'm actually trying to change that. I'm trying to actually make it a Saturday. And when we come back in March with Cambosis, we're probably gonna go on a Saturday night. But yeah, I think something they're used to. Obviously, I get it as well. There's not a lot happening midweek sports wise for those guys, so it's going to do good numbers. It's a great fight. I mean, Jai Opetaia was supposed to be fighting Sin Cara, the mandatory challenger, which was okay, but just something we had to kind of just get on with and get done. And then all of a sudden, he pulls out. We go down the list, and I actually went past Naika because I said he's not going to take the fight, and he did. He was due to fight on the card. It was 3 weeks prep. They've sparred before. So somehow, some way, he's seen something, and he thinks he can win the fight, and it's gonna be a great night.
Yeah, the face-off that we saw after the weigh-in, pretty intense. I think it's going to be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. I want to get to more about that fight, that card, and your plans in Australia. But as always, you are at the intersection of a lot of big things happening and could be happening in boxing. I want to ask you about something that Anthony Joshua said this week. He's on vacation in Africa, did a couple of interviews, and talked about the Tyson Fury fight. Said he wants to make that fight happen in 2025. Acknowledged that, at 35 years old, the clock is ticking on his career. Obviously, for Fury, it's way too soon to be even approaching him about his next fight. But when you talk to Queensberry and you talk to Turki Al-Sheikh or whoever you're talking to, like how realistic do you think it is that AJ Fury is what we get next?
I mean, I think you made a very good point. Like, it's just a couple of weeks after the Usyk defeat. I'm sure Fury's still, upset with a defeat. Um, I keep saying to people, and I think the smart ones acknowledge it, and the haters kind of turn their nose up. It's the biggest fight in boxing, right? Commercially, there's nothing like, and I keep saying, well, people are like, tell me another one. It's just a huge fight, and for AJ, when you look at his resume, the only thing really missing, I know the Wilder fight that we signed for, he got beat, but it's just Tyson Fury on the resume. And there's only really two things for AJ. One is to try and rematch Daniel Dubois, who's obviously got a tough fight against Joseph Parker, and the other one is to fight Tyson Fury. And I just feel like as long as Tyson Fury wants to carry on and is motivated to fight, I just believe it will happen because I don't see other options for Fury. And I know that our other option is perhaps Dubois, but this is something that it's hard to explain, Chris. From a UK perspective, kind of like it'll always be remembered that fight never happened, and it's not like both guys are shot. I mean, Tyson Fury had two very close fights with Alexander Usyk. AJ was on a great run after a poor start and a poor performance against Dubois, but both guys still at the relative peak of their powers, and it's just a massive fight. And I do believe we'll see it in the summer.
You've had a few months with AJ to digest that loss to Daniel Dubois. And when you talk to him about the rest of his career, like one of the things that Sergio and I have talked about in the last couple of weeks is Anthony Joshua's heart still in this game, right? Like he can obviously make a pile of money by continuing to fight. He's still a big star in the UK. That Fury fight, I think you'd agree, million pay-per-view buy, sell out Wembley Stadium, huge event. But is his heart still in the game in the same way it was in the game in 2017 or 2020 or even as recently as a couple of years ago when he was winning those last three fights?
Yeah, honestly, I think the honest answer to that is unquestionably. Like I've seen the pain that he suffered from the Dubois defeat. And he suffered that because he wants it so bad. You know, he strives for that great performance. He puts all the work in to make sure that he can deliver on the night, and he didn't deliver. And worse than that, he didn't perform. And I think he's he's been down. I'll be honest. Like he hasn't taken this defeat well, in my opinion. And that's the sign of someone that cares, and that's the sign of someone that wants it. And he wants it bad. He still does. You know, he's got a huge amount of fire in his belly. You say that he can make money by keying off fight. He don't need the money. Like he does. You know, the money from a Fury fight kind of becomes like not irrelevant, but he's got enough money you know, he's done fantastically well. He wants to compete. Now, at the same time, when a fighter starts to decline, which I actually don't think he is on the decline, but if he shows signs of that, that's when the team have to step in and say, look, I think we have to think about our position right now. But we didn't see that decline in the Dubois camp. You know, we felt very good and confident going into that fight. And, you know, we still believe as a team that he's got a lot to give. And this is going to be a big year for him. Who knows? Could be his last year in boxing. But he's very motivated.
All right, speaking of money, Conor Benn is looking for that next big payday, that next big event. And I want to tell you, I want you to get your take on this and tell me if my read of this situation right now is wrong. I think you really want to make the Chris Eubank fight for obvious reasons. That's beyond AJ Fury. That's the next biggest event I think you can make over in the UK. We saw how big it was going to be back in 2022. I can see why you'd want to put that back together. I do think there are factions inside Conor Benn's camp, maybe even Conor Benn himself, that want to go back down to welterweight, that want to fight Mario Barrios because they believe that a title is not only a feather in the cap, but it might also lead to that Gervonta Davis fight, which is something that Conor's talked about, over the last few months. So where does that stand? I mean, is that a fair assessment of it? I mean, is there kind of a divide
I think so,
between
yeah.
what you want?
Honestly, I'm easy on it. Like, I get both sides of the argument. I mean, we saw Barrios perform mediocrely in his last fight. I believe Conor Benn beats Barrios in London, and he would, in doing so, become the WBC World Welterweight Champion, which has a lot of stock in that. You know, I mean, it would be a great position for him. The money to fight Chris Eubank Jr. is 4 times more than fighting Barrios, right? And I think it's the same level of toughness, the fight. Like, the only difficulty in the Eubank fight is the weight. Like, that's, if this was 247 pounders with their skill set and their stages in their career, I'd be super confident that Conor wins that fight well. But it's a 50-50 fight because of the weight. So it's not really ideal going to 160, if I'm honest. But it's enough money to set you up for life, your kids for life, and make sure that you live a wonderful life. And for me, that's what the sport, whilst legacy is always important, you can't eat it. And this is something that, you know, we have to look at carefully. So I'm happy with either decision, in all honesty. For me, of course, I want to put a big event together. I want to, you know, break records and numbers and make money. But I'm also romanticized by Conor becoming WBC welterweight world champion. His father was WBC super middleweight world champion and middleweight world champion, and you know, it would be an incredible achievement. So I think if the Eubank fight is there and it's ready to be made, it's very difficult to turn down.
Why is it so difficult to get on the same page financially? I mean, you had a deal back in 2022. I understand you changed the weight a little bit. You make some concessions based on what's been going on with Conor the last couple of years. But why isn't it as easy as saying, hey, we had a deal in 2022. Let's go back to the deal that we had?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is the fight's much bigger commercially because of everything that's happened. I mean, it's been spoke about for 2 years solid. Number 2 is they now can't stand each other. And there is a genuine hate between them. And originally, I don't think they really liked each other before, but there was kind of like a mutual respect. You know, our dads were fighters and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now it's just like they can't stand each other. The weight has been moved. You know, and we have to still talk about, you know, whether, you know, originally it was 157 pounds, I think, with like an £8 or £9 rehydration. Now it's 160. And what's the rehydration situation? You know, Eubank saying none. We're saying, well, there has to be something. You know, we can't just put a welterweight in with a middleweight and let you come in at 180 pounds, 185 pounds on the night. So that's in discussion as well. But yeah, I think the main thing is everything that's happened, like, and the unwillingness of both men to move on their position out of principle and ego. And I've been there many times before, and it makes a fight very difficult to make.
So last month, when we were down in Puerto Rico for the Paro Hitchens fight, I saw you going to work to try to make a unification fight for Boots Ennis against Amata Stanionis. You've talked about that a little bit this week, about how you're trying to get that fight ultimately made. I mean, how far away do you think you are from that fight? How realistic is it that Boots Stanionis gets made in the first quarter of this year?
It's not made yet, but I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, I think that, you know, Boots is decent, but maybe mediocre performance against Judasian has actually put him in a good spot, because it used to just be, oh, well, okay, give me the money and I'll kind of fight Boots and give my belt to Boots. Now it's like, well, actually, we might be able to beat Boots. And I think there's no doubt that the best champion in the division is Stanionis outside of Boots. I think that's the toughest fight. And I think he's the guy that, you know, I mean, I've been talking to Louis de Cubas about this fight for a while. Obviously, they're going to want to get paid very well. But, you know, the reality is that Boots turned down Ortiz and Teofimo Lopez fights for the pure reason of the only thing he wants to do is unify the division. And that's not about money. That's just about legacy and greatness of you know, capturing these belts. So we're on a bit of a mission to help him get that done, and we're closing in. We're not there yet, but I'm hopeful that in the next week we might be able to get some good news regarding a unification fight in April.
Puts a lot of pressure on you if he turns down Boots and
Yeah, it does. I mean,
Teofimo.
look, when we make those decisions, you know, we say, we're pretty honest and say, look, I'm not guaranteeing you a unification. I'll do everything I can to make one, but this is a bird in the hand scenario. The Ortiz fight is there now. The Teofimo fight was a poor offer anyway, but it, you know, that's there if we want to try and make it. But we'll go the other way, but there's no guarantees. But obviously, when they put their trust in you, it puts a lot of pressure on to try and get it over the line.
Have you been following the Teofimo Twitter experience over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I've kind of trying one of my resolutions for 2025 is to try and spend less time on Twitter, just because I find myself mindlessly scrolling through rubbish. I mean, I don't know if you saw the fake Michael Benson account
Oh,
yesterday.
I was going to bring that up later, but yeah, I did.
Yeah, I mean, I've had 50 messages from people asking if I was okay. You know, for context, if you haven't seen it, the fake Michael Benson account says that I fought off 4 armed robbers in a jewelry store in Miami, and I'm now in hospital with a wound on my leg. I mean, I just landed in Australia when this came out, and you know, it had 1 million views, and there's actually 4 or 5 outlets that have reported the story based on I mean, it's absolutely frightening. So I kind of said to myself this year, stop filling your head with just negativity and rubbish, and sort of just use Twitter more sparingly. So I haven't seen a lot of the Teofimo Lopez stuff, but it sounds like he's not happy. You know, I mean, look, they approached us about Boots, like I said, and it wasn't an appalling offer, but it was less money than he made to fight Judasian, pretty much. So, like, I don't know what they're going to do, Top Rank, with Teofimo. He's clearly not the easiest to work with. You know, he wants to be bought out of his contract. Aram's incredibly stubborn. He's not going to, you know, everything that he's invested in Teofimo, all the work that he's done, he's not just going to let him go. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
Have
But,
you have you offered them Richardson Hitchens in a unification fight?
no, not yet. I mean, we're happy to do it, but, you know, it's maybe something that we can look at. But we from a Catterall Barboza point of view, which is the mandatory fight for Teofimo, be nice to really know what Teofimo is going to do, because if he's moving to 47, we'd love that fight to be for the full title. And if he's going to be out of action for a while, we'd love that fight to be for the interim world title. So it's going to be interesting.
Katie Taylor, fantastic win over Amanda Serrano a couple of months ago. They could fight a million times. That each one of them would be great fights. She put on social media recently, like, ready for a big 2025. I think there were some people around her, Eddie, that had hoped she might consider retiring. She's clearly not going in that direction. What do you have in store for Katie Taylor in 2025?
I mean, I think there's not many fights that are going to really motivate her. I mean, she's made a lot of money. Her legacy is untouched, in my opinion, as a female fighter. Serrano 3, I think, is the obvious choice. Like you said, they've had 2 fight of the year contenders. They could fight 10 times and every one would be a fight of the year contender. So there's a couple of things that Katie hasn't done in her career. One is Croke Park and the other one is Las Vegas. It's 2 things that really appeal to her. And you know, she won't like me saying, but she won't mind me saying, I don't think, that you know, she is coming towards the end. You know, and whether it's 1 or whether it's 2, you know, it's, again, like AJ, 2025 might be the last year in boxing. Because there's only so many times you can go to the well. She's been there so many times. I mean, you know, when you talk about the number 1 pound for pound fighter, you have to look at the opposition that they've faced. And some people have been a little bit unlucky that they don't have the opposition. Like Clarissa's probably one of them. I think Clarissa is just an incredible fighter. But up in that weight division, you don't have the liquidity of opponents to just be in great fights all the time. When you look at Katie, you know, she beat Natasha Jonas, who's now unified at 154. She beat Delphine Pursoon in her absolute prime in 2 absolute crackers. You know, even going back, she beat Jessica McCaskill, you know, who was undisputed champion. She beat Chantel Cameron. She beat Amanda Serrano twice. You know, she beat champions in, even going back to like Rose Valente when she unified the division. I'm sure I've missed loads of other fights as well, but like she's been incredible. She really has. And you know, I think off the back of the Netflix audience and off the back of, you know, maybe a little bit of controversy, I think Serrano 3 would be the fight.
You is that, given the open hostility that exists between you and MVP, how feasible do you think that is at this point?
Well, we managed to get 2 done. I mean, you know, the hostility was there. The hostility was there mainly for the second fight, and obviously there was a bit more added hostility through the events of the second fight and so forth. I don't really care. I mean, we wouldn't be doing our job for Amanda and Katie if we let our feelings and thoughts and ongoing disputes get in the way of providing them with opportunities. And the reality is, and I've said it before, and I said it to Nikisa, like, I never liked Jake Paul against Mike Tyson. But what MV did with that event was incredible. And they provided Amanda and Katie with an incredible platform and the biggest payday of their career. So for that, we're eternally thankful to MVP for what they did in that fight. And I don't care. Like, if they want to do the fight again or if we want to, I don't really care. I just will make sure Katie gets her true value. She'll get the right fight, the right opportunity. And, you know, if we have to go and get another away win, so be it. And if we can do something at Croke Park, now's the time, because off the back of that audience, it would fill it up.
Who were you yelling at in the ring that was seated ringside?
It was kind of like, it wasn't one individual person. It was like, you have to remember, like, I'm sitting in the middle of the front row, and then you've got Nikisa in front of me, Eddie's throne, kind of thing, you know. And then you had Nikisa, like, you had all of MVP, you had Nikisa's family, you had, you know, and look, I'm just as bad as anyone when these fights are going. I'm desperate to win. And they were desperate to win. There was a few things that shouted out that I felt were disrespectful to Katie Taylor during the fight, but it's the heat of the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think after the fact, people would have agreed that there were things that shouldn't have been said during the fight, and I definitely overreacted when we won. But it was not like, I did turn to that group of people who were shouting that stuff and said, like that's just I don't. And by the way, if Serrano would have got the decision, I would have expected that entire group of people to do the same to me. It's just we just want to win real bad, And afterwards, like Nikisa said to me, we had in a ring, and we were just pretty honest. Like he said, "What you're shouting at my?" I said, "Yeah, they shouted out things they shouldn't have. I think it was disrespectful." And I said to him after, "I'm sorry, like I probably did overreact, but it's just from the heart, pure emotion. What do you want? I don't think you can ever really apologise for pure emotion." I didn't say anything that was, untoward, but yeah, I did look at that group of people and say, yes.
It gave you a viral moment, and later it gave Brian Peters a viral moment. So
Oh yeah, Brian's a hero, social media hero.
You both had your moments there. So Jai goes in action on Wednesday in Australia, and it should be a fun fight, like we just talked about. If he gets through this fight, the natural next matchup is against Zurdo Ramirez. Zurdo's got 2 belts. He's a golden boy fighter. It shouldn't be that difficult to piece that fight together. Do you look at that as a lock for being Jai's next fight in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I hear about Dorticus and some WBA mandatories and stuff like that. I mean, hopefully there's a way around that. They let Inoue have a way around that a few times with Akhmadaliev, so maybe we can get the same treatment. I think it's the best fight in the division, and a lot of people talking about Opetaia against Usyk at the moment. That's a big build, and I actually think style-wise it's a tremendous fight. But I think the only way that we can start getting some real momentum for that fight is if Jai can become undisputed at cruiserweight, because that's what Usyk did. Usyk was undisputed at cruiserweight, moved to heavyweight, became undisputed. So if Jai can, first things first, win tomorrow, and then beat Zurdo Ramirez, and then try and capture the WBC title, then we can start calling out Alexander Usyk. Like at the moment, I think a lot of people agree it's a great fight, but you got to go some to start calling this man out. It's our plan down the line, but let us do our job and let us pick up the same credentials that Alexander Usyk picked up, because then if you do that, he's not going to moan anyway, but no one can moan that we're calling Usyk out because Usyk did the same thing, So get through tomorrow, but after that, certainly title challenges should be next for Jai Opetaia.
Yeah, and I guess my concern would be when Zurdo beat Chris Billam-Smith, I kind of had the same conversations with Golden Boy people, and Dorticos, who's the number 1 challenger's name came up. The WBC champion's name came up. It didn't sound like, look, they're not going to duck Jai Opetaia, but it also sounded like there were other options they were going to consider.
Yeah, it's going to take His Excellency to make them an offer that really they have to accept, basically, because no one's going to be queuing up to fight Jai. And that's a tough fight for Zurdo Ramirez, who's a very talented fighter. I love the fight.
So you've sort of penetrated this Australian market now. You've got a handful of Australian fighters. You're going to do, 4 or 5 fights down in Australia this year. Like, what do you see as the growth potential of this Australian market?
I think a lot. I mean, feeling it this week and the vibe and, the numbers. There's a lot of activity in Australia in terms of boxing. I mean, if you look at our roster, obviously we just signed George Kambosos, Jai Opetaia, Liam Paro, Sky Nicholson, Justice Honey, Tera Moana, and other young fighters. We've got pretty much the cream of the crop. I mean, there's only really Tim Tszyu who's just got beat, who's, that at that kind of level. So I think we're really well placed to do something. I'm not saying it's a market that's going to compete with the UK or the US, but I think that 4 to 5 shows a year is a nice spot for us. And obviously DAZN's purchase recently of Foxtel, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And, we see that we don't just pick countries and go, well, that'd be nice. Let's go over there. We look at the quality of the fighters, the current situation of the market, but also DAZN subscribers. I mean, the beauty of the global product of DAZN is we know what numbers we're doing in what countries. And off the back of Usyk Fury, once again, we saw a huge amount of buys coming from Australia for that fight. And I think tomorrow night it will do very well as well. So you start to build a subscriber base, and then the broadcaster will want to service those subscribers with additional content. And that's where I think we're at with Australia. So, it's not going to be a market that's going to make us tens of millions of dollars, but it's a market that, for me, we can provide great content. And it's also about providing great content for subscribers in other markets. So, for example, on a random Wednesday, on January the 8th, fight fans around the world can watch a really good World Championship matchup. It's going to be the very early hours or morning time for East Coast and West Coast. It's going to be very early afternoon for the UK. It's going to be late afternoon for the Middle East and prime time for Australia. So the product DAZN is about providing consistent, high quality fight nights. And anything we do that adds to that schedule is great news for subscribers.
You mentioned that March date that you're going to come back to Australia. I believe George Kambosos is going to be on that card then. George is looking for a big fight. He's going after Richardson Hitchens on social media. You've also got Dalton Smith out there as a potential candidate to fight him. I mean, is Hitchens the way that you're leaning? Because even though I think that's a great build-up, Eddie, being honest, like that feels like 12-zip Richardson Hitchens, if we're being real about it. Like
maybe, I think it's down to George. I mean, George, you can never call him an opponent because of the profile that he's built. And, I mean, sometimes, obviously, the Maxi Hughes fight was, different. But Devin Haney and Lomachenko, they're very good fighters. And getting beat by them, there's no real disgrace. I think the key is going to be to come back in March against a solid opponent at 140 and see how he looks. If he can make a statement there. I like the matchup with Richardson Hitchens as an event. Back to the theatre, loads of smack talk between them. George is going to give it everything to become a 2-division world champion. And for Richardson, it's a high-profile victory if he was to win. So I actually like the fight, but I think we need to see from George in March that performance at 140. Hopefully he can make a statement. And then, I've no problem making Hitchens Kambosos if George can come off a good win.
Before I let you go, I mentioned before we started recording this, I just came from the WWE Netflix premiere in Los Angeles. Great event. WWE does a great product. We saw them dabble in boxing with the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. They are now officially in business with someone like Dana White that's flirted with boxing, with someone like Nick Khan that's been in boxing before. Do you look at Netflix as a potential challenger in the years to come? How do you see them out there lurking as a live combat sports rights provider?
I mean, I can't speak on their behalf. I mean, we've got our own Netflix show coming up in the summer of 2025
right, yes.
From a documentary standpoint, which is going to be great for the sport and the business. Everyone's different. I mean, for me, we mass produce championship fights. Last year we did 36 shows. And I'm not really interested in breaking up. I think breaking up your rights and providing packages for broadcasters basically means you can't find a broadcaster that's prepared to take all your content. So for me, DAZN's the perfect partner because it gives me that global reach and it also allows me to put a global schedule together. There are huge benefits and advantages of the audience that Netflix brings. I can't speak on their behalf. My gut feeling would be that I don't think Netflix are going to be in the boxing business at that same liquidity level of shows. But I think they're going to pick and choose what they want. And I think off the back of the success, if you call it that, in terms of the numbers for Jake Paul against Mike Tyson, I think they'd be more than willing to stage other events. Are you going to see them do 35 shows a year? No, in my opinion. Are you going to see them do 12 shows a year? No, in my opinion. Would they do 2, 3, 4 major shows a year? Yes, I think so. Boxing, despite the fact that everyone says, or the haters like to say boxing is dead, when you get it right, there's nothing like it. And I think they saw that. Excuse me.
Well, Eddie, I appreciate it. And stay away from knife fights in airports,
Yeah,
gangs.
it's a great story. I mean, I should like to say there was 4 armed robbers. I would have liked it to have been 6. I thought it was a better story. But
it's kind of remarkable. I think it was I saw Jojo Diaz say he's got your back or something like that. Like he's gonna protect you. Like this guy's like subtweeting. It's not even a good fake Michael Benson. The name's spelled wrong and the handle's
Best
different.
Boxing news. I know. And it's like someone's messaging. I'd like loads of security companies contact me, like going, you shouldn't travel alone without security. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway.
Eddie, well, stay safe out there, man. And I appreciate your time.
Cheers, mate.